Hello, gorgeous star seeds and light workers. I'm Alexander Quinn, Starseed Navigating the Light, and today I've got the incredible Pam Gregory. How are you doing today?
Yep, most of me is terrific. Thank you, Alexander.
And we're going to be talking about a few things. We're just going to be talking about the new moon in Sagittarius, a few bits and pieces going on, but predominantly my personal interest is what's going on in March of next year, because there are some astrological things, but also galactically there are some major things, and I wanted to go into it. So do you want to start a little bit just with the new moon and some of the bits that are just happening now, just to sort of get us into the feel of it?
Yeah, I mean, in many ways, this is a very optimistic new moon. It's a very hopeful new moon. It's ruled by Jupiter, which is planet of expansion. Sagittarius is to do with expansion, bigger visions. It's to do with long distance travel, which can bring in the galactics as well. It's very future looking, and it's also to do with truth. It's to do with freedom. Jupiter is particularly strong here because it's stationary on the day of the new moon. It's also on the world axis, which means whatever is unfolding now, will unfold in a bigger way. Those could involve legalities, because Sagittarius is one of the two signs linked to legalities. So, but there's a feeling, there's a lot of mutability, 6 planets in mutable signs. And that can give a feeling of either adaptability, flexibility, we're adjusting to whatever's coming at us, but it can sometimes give us slightly kind of out of control. There's so much that's it's almost like the energy is being thrown up for grabs, as it were. But I see that really positively, is that we can step in as co-creators to reform our set of modeling clay in the way we want it reformed. So that gives us a lot of I'm always saying that our reality is much more malleable than we realize. And this is a lot about malleability in this new moon. So from that point of view, I think it's incredibly positive.
It is incredibly positive. Certainly since eclipse season started, things have definitely been thrown up a lot. I've definitely been seeing huge expansions, especially in consciousness and galactic stuff. It's so fast that people haven't quite actually managed to come to terms with some of the, I would say, conscious mechanics of it, grounding into it. How do you actually ground that down? There is still that very quite lost feeling in a lot of people, and I see a lot of that starting to come sort of more come into fruition, or kind of play out and come into more conscious understanding from the conscious more in March and going forward. But I think there's a lot. I still think we've got a bit of turbulence coming up over this winter energetically.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, at the 3D level, I think it's going to be a tsunami. Absolutely. So, we come back to, where is your focus? Where is your attention? Because if your focus is on the 3D, watching the nightly news, you are likely to feel overwhelmed by events. There's going to be so much coming at us because, as you say, Alexander, everything's kind of speeding up. But if you are in a different place energetically, if you can get onto that eagle's perch that I always talk about, if you can get to that point of neutrality, that's the 0 point field. From where we create, you can just observe, not have to be in the fray, not have your energy knocked about from moment to moment. Another big scary thing. You're just observing whatever is playing out and saying, nope, I do not choose that on my timeline. I'm going to create a timeline over here, which is beautiful, loving, compassionate, abundant. That's where my focus goes. And a lot of people are doing that. The more of us that do that, the easier it gets. It's all about just creating a wave, a new energetic hologram of love, care, compassion, gratitude. We do it. Yeah. And then, the physical reality forms from that. But that's why I'm endlessly banging on about us doing that. Just lift your vision from the, turn off the news, I'd suggest very strongly. Yeah. And go inwards as well. Just watch your breath. Just shut your eyes, turn off the external stimuli, watch your breath, drop into your heart, candle gaze. Simple stuff, all for free. Anybody can do it. And that starts to shift and recalibrate your consciousness, even by doing that.
Because the Sagittarius energy at the moment is quite restless.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, I'm not the astrologer here. You are. I'm the galactics, and the ones But I do understand that there is something. Mars is out of bounds at the moment, so that can also bring something. It's almost like the expansion is so quick, but we can't quite ground it down into our reality yet, and the ego is panicking. And then what happens is, I get a lot of clients come to me and go, God, I feel so lost at the moment. I can feel myself expanding, but where is it going? And I think that's part of what's happening right now.
Yeah, and I'd say just bare feet on the earth, bare feet on the ground, weather permitting in the UK. It's absolutely blowing a hoolie out there. And
the weather's horrible out there at the moment.
Horrible. Yeah. But, the more you can just put bare feet on the ground, just suck up those healing ions from the earth. And just in turning inwards, don't focus on events, don't focus on a specific outcome. Just float in neutrality, which is loving, caring, compassionate, grateful. Just float in that feeling, because it's that's going to produce a much more positive reality than another scary thing. Because what the Mars out of bounds adds to, Mars is our energy, and when it's out of bounds, it can have this out of control feeling, which adds to the less positive expression of Sagittarius, of things being kind of all over the place and overwhelming. Yeah. And that's why we've really got to kind of master our energy by turning inwards. And, I really try and teach stuff that is absolutely free, simple, and accessible for every single living being on the earth.
Yeah. God, I wish I could do that as well. What's interesting is we had all of those planets in retrograde for a very, very long time. I think, was it 7? Was it 8? How many was it?
Yeah, it was 8 at one point. Yeah.
So it's almost like we got this timeline playing out where we had a period of major retrospection, right? Basically, you're being forced by the cosmos to sit back deliberately. You're being stopped. Now we're getting all the change and the expansion, but it's not grounded yet. It's like we passed the marker in 2012. Ascension's already done, but now it's just got to play out. And then we have more events, and we're going to talk about March in a minute. But it's almost like, for me, energetically, it's almost like it's going to kind of start hitting our reality in March. And that's what I started seeing. And one of the reasons why I really wanted to talk to you today is because about 3 months ago, I was seeing March, early April coming up with my readings and things I was doing. And sometimes some of the stuff I get is so fantastical, because I'm dealing with mantis beings and creator beings and Arcturians. And sometimes even I have to ground it down into some kind of format reality that I can understand, because sometimes, when I'm having a conversation with a mantis being, it's clicks and frequencies and stuff. So when I was getting March like 3 months ago, I'm thinking, is this more crazy stuff? And then I see you talking about it. And then I see Brackett talking about it. I'm like, okay, I'm not crazy. I need to, I really want to discuss this, because I see major change. So before we get to March, there's a few other bits. What do you think on that timeline?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think there's going to be a big energetic shift then, and we can talk about the detail in a moment. Yeah, absolutely.
The other thing I wanted to touch on is, now this is where I want your expertise, because what I do see happening a lot more is the tectonic plates changing a lot more, but also water shifting. So when the Pleiadians are constantly going on about water's not going to disappear, but it is massively going to shift, but flooding is going to increase. And does that play out on an astrological level?
Yeah, absolutely. This is really Jupiter, Neptune, because Jupiter and Neptune came together exactly in conjunction in April. And I anticipated then, many things like big inflation, big oil price rises, but also potentially flooding. There was massive flooding in Australia and also South Africa. But now it's coming back. It's sort of Jupiter moved into Aries, but now it's reversed back, retrograded back into Pisces again. So it's again in conjunction with Neptune. Now, still have massive flooding in Australia. Those poor people have hardly dried out. Pakistan, huge flooding, but there could still be more flooding, particularly between now and the solstice, when Jupiter then moves back into Aries. So yes, the potential for flooding is very high, actually, even in the UK, actually, that the potential for flooding is very high. I can't say the specific geographies because that's a global thing. But yes, absolutely, I'd endorse that. And just, yes, major Earth changes. I mean, Uranus staying in Taurus, Uranus is it's a discontinuous energy. It's like a sudden shock, a bolt of lightning. It's never steady. It's never gradual. It's never linear. And in Taurus, which is fixed Earth, I want to hold things steady as they are. You've got these lightning rods coming in. And even that is one of the classic signatures for earthquakes and volcanoes. And that's until 2026. So I think we're likely to see a lot of Earth changes in extreme ways. Yes, I do. It's part of the Earth's upgrade. The Earth is kind of giving birth to another Gaia, an upgraded Gaia, if you like. So that's why we're seeing it on such a physical level. And I think we'll continue to do so. Yeah.
And of course, as the electromagnetics change and we get closer to what, some people call it a solar flash. I'd like to think of it more scientifically as maybe an electromagnetic flip or something to that, but migratory rates of birds will change. Migratory rates of humans will change as well.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's water. I just wanted to. I'm just fascinated because the water does. There is an astrological link to that as well as the scientific, and it was just fascinating just to pick your brains on that.
And also the changes in the electromagnetic field, which you're mentioning, Alexander. I always talk about this in my videos about the drop in the sun's and the Earth's magnetic shield, which is letting in all this cosmic and galactic energy. And the CMEs, the coronal mass ejections, M-class, X-class flares, they are just exponential compared to what we had just 2 or 3 years ago. They're off the charts in terms of frequency and strength. So that is affecting the Schumann resonances. It's affecting us because we're living beings on the Earth, and our little kind of individual energy systems have to continually adapt to being zapped with this. Essentially, it's new information. So it's fantastic because it's new information that's upgrading us. But we are ascending at dizzying speed. I don't think we've ever ascended at such speed in our human evolution ever in any lifetime. So it's kept, we're kind of hanging on to the side rails here.
No, we haven't. And what people forget that on a galactic level, our whole galaxy is going up an octave as well. We are not the only ones. But, people need to take that into account. But because we're coming from one of the lowest density perspectives, it is the hardest because we're going from carbon to crystalline, so on and so forth. So, but it's such a big consciousness shift. It's like going from grade 1 piano to all the way up to 8 straight away. Whereas other beings are going from grade 8 to just more masterful levels of grade 8, so on and so forth. Now we're going to play the rack 3, some Tchaikovsky at double the speed now, but we knew how to do it before. So it is a shocking rate. Of course, we're getting the DNA upgrades and stuff, and I love. What I love, because I love the galactic stuff and the energetic stuff, but what I love is how it does coincide with the astrology of things. And people say you can't predict dates, you can't make dates, you can't say that. And to some degree, that is true. But when things are linked to the planets, which do run like clockwork, you can sometimes make predictions. And that is how sometimes, when I'll give a date or something, I'll actually run off the planets. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, this is a really, really interesting one. And it's something that's fascinated me since I was 7 years old, actually. The concept of time. I remember, I think the naughtiest thing I ever did as a child was I got a book out of our local library called Time. I can't possibly remember the author. It was so long ago. I never took it back. I read it, and because I was just obsessed with this concept of time. And if it's true that linear time only exists in this 3D world, then the birth charts and the mundane charts that I'm working with will only really apply with that timing in this reality. So once we upgrade, the whole concept of time starts to loosen up very significantly, and I can then retire, because I don't know how that's going to work yet.
Yeah, well, it's amazing you just said that, because I had a client today. I won't mention her name, God bless her, because she'll if she's watching this, she'll probably know who she is. But she was saying to me earlier on, can you diagnose, find out, and help me learn who my star family are, my star family connections, where I'm from, blah, 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 blah. And I said, okay, we'll do that. Of course, it's part of my job. It's part of what I do. And then we got to the end of it. And I said, and now that you've got that out the way, I think we should move on to something that's actually not completely, that's actually might help you in this lifetime, because, there's no time on the other side. And as you develop and progress and change multidimensionally, you might have star connections from Andromeda, Antares, Hades, so on and so forth. But as you begin to develop, more beings, different beings will come in, and it'll become irrelevant, because and who you're going to be and what you're going to do on the other side where there is no time. So it's sort of, and we're having to unlearn everything at the moment, even our star family connections, because it's all new. And that it is funny that you mentioned what you just said, because I had this conversation with a client earlier on today. So of course, people love to know where I'm from, what star family, and of course I always love entertaining that, but even that we've now got to unlearn, because it's a completely new paradigm. It's unlike anything ever before.
I really, really agree, Alexander. And, if we're going to step into becoming interdimensional or multidimensional galactic beings, we are everywhere and nowhere at the same time. So, trying to pin it down in a very concrete 3D way of, I came from here, and then at a certain time I went to Sirius, and then after Sirius, nail it. Then I went to Lyra, all of that I think is just going to be up for grabs. I think the whole nature of our reality, our cosmos, the galaxies, how we've understood our reality, I think we are going to go through paradigm shattering times. And that is one of the big themes of Pluto moving into Aquarius. If we look back to when it was in Aquarius previously, say 1543, that's when Copernicus published his heliocentric theory. And so to the average bloke in the street, who just like you and I today, Alexander, we wake up and we see the sun rise in the east and move around the sky and set in the west, at least on a sunny day. How could it be that that isn't the case? The earth is moving around the sun, not what you're seeing with your eyes. And to the average bloke in the street in 1543, that was it was just so hard to get your head around. It was paradigm shattering. I think we are going to move into paradigm shattering times, particularly around the nature of reality, cosmos, galaxies, time, everything really, starting from next year.
Well, I mean, absolutely. I mean, Einstein said that the 4 dimensions of time and space. There are 4 dimensions to time and space, but as the equilibrium speeds up, eventually we will hit instantaneous, and we will hit that 0 point where there is no time. And it is very gradually happening, but we are having more of those multidimensional, shifts where you go in the kitchen for a bottle of water, like you can't remember why you're there because you've timeline shifted and so on and so forth. And that's going to be happening more and more and more. So it just keeps expanding. But thank God we're getting the upgrades, Pam, so that we can deal with it. Because some of these big ones that come, the body is like, oh my God, can I deal with this? Then we get the upgrades, we progress. So, and now what they call those blackouts on the Schumann. I mean, that's we get this all the time now, the blackouts. So and it'll increase. So yeah, it's an interesting one.
But also I'd say to people, which I often do, any physical symptoms like insomnia, extreme tiredness, aches and pains, tinnitus, dizziness, see it as evidence of the upgrade. Don't see it as a problem, a health issue. See it as evidence of the upgrade, because that's really. I mean, I'm like a dormouse at the moment.
Yeah. I am. And I'd like to give a message to not only people who are not readers and healers and professionals who do it for a living like us, but also to professionals who do it like us as well. Energetically, when you go through an upgrade, it's okay to just almost step out the energy for a week, or just sit back and just allow it to wash over you and just let nothing happen for a few days. It's okay. It happens to all of us.
I'd really support that as well. Try and go with the flow. We don't want to resist what is potentially the biggest evolutionary upgrade of any lifetime. You know, that would make such a pig's ear of it, wouldn't it? So try not to resist it. Try and flow with it and see it as this magical opportunity that we've been given.
Let's talk a little bit about finance and stuff. I woke up this
big one, wasn't it? Boy, it was a big one.
Yeah. I woke up this morning and I said to my partner, I said, I'm talking to Pam a bit later on. And I was looking at some interesting things. And I said to her, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I've written this down, but the stock market crash in 1929 and 2008 and now are all linked to Saturn-Uranus squares. Is that correct?
Well, hard aspects between Saturn and Pluto. So it can be a conjunction, a square, an opposition, but absolutely, 2008 was the opposition between Saturn and Uranus.
Shut the door. The washing machine has reached its cycle and it's going beep, beep. I finished. Carry on.
No worries. So that is one aspect. The other is the fact that nodal axis is in Taurus and Scorpio, and that is the financial axis. So round about the total lunar eclipse in particular, we expected to see some financial volatility, let's say. On the day of that total lunar eclipse, you had FTX, which was the second largest crypto exchange, worth $32 billion, go to zero. 32 billion to zero over a period of hours. And that's, those were life-changing amounts of money for investors. So it just crashed to the wall. And of course, it's also about, Saturn is about centralization, control from government center. Uranus is about decentralization, but in Taurus, it's also about digital currencies. So could it possibly be that this massive, massive crash where people have lost so much money, and this was a decentralized exchange, that somebody might be saying, it's so much safer for you, Saturn, so much safer if these digital currencies were centralized by your government. Wouldn't that be a good, safe idea? Are you following where I'm at with this, Alexander?
Yes, yeah, I'm following. I'm on the edge of it. I mean, some of the astrology stuff is new to me. I do follow it, but I'm following. I'm learning. Yeah, I'm actually learning while you're telling me this. Yeah.
Yeah, so but it's very interesting. It's almost like this could be a warning to people, look what happens if you have an unregulated digital currency, decentralized. Look what happens. People lose a lot of money. So wouldn't it be safer for you if it was centralized by your government? Do you get where I'm going with that clash?
I do. I do. Yeah. I do get where you're going. I mean, it's a bit of a double-edged sword, that one, because there's so much speculation going on around, gold-backed currencies and the RV and all this stuff. And I've got opinions about some of this stuff, which are not in alignment with the collective, actually. And sometimes when I've had opinions about things that have been not in alignment with the collective, I've actually been the first person to be right. So, but the problem is, and as we both know this as YouTubers, if you say something that is wildly out of what the collective is saying at this moment in time, things get very frisky in the comments section. So,
very polarized. The benefit for me, Alexander, is I can't see the specific events. I can't see the specific outcomes, the specific events. All I know is the quality of energy and the timing. And so it's up to us as the co-creators as to how that plays out. Timelines are changing in every second. So, I can't reliably predict an event because it could change tomorrow, because the collective consciousness has changed. So that's why, and it's up to us. And that's actually very empowering to say, this is your modeling clay, this is your sheet of music for the moment. How are you going to play it magnificently? And therefore you determine the best possible events coming from this energy. Because I can't say what, I literally can't say, because I don't think I'm particularly psychic. I'm much more analytical. And therefore we'll see what plays out. And that also detaches me from any particular outcome, or I'm blue not red, or red not blue, or Labour or Conservative. We've got to go beyond all that polarity and tit for tat if we're ever going to raise our consciousness. Those kinds of angry tit for tat debates have gone on for thousands of years. War, poverty, misery, somebody's right, somebody's wrong. We've got to up our game. We are now in the crucible of change, and we can't keep on going around the hamster wheel as the same old being that we've always been. We've got to up our game, all of us.
I mean, in some respects, I mean, I aside from other things I do, I read cards, I read tarot. What's interesting, with the tarot and astrology is that it gives us a kind of balance sheet of the strong potentials for where we're going to go.
Absolutely.
Without negating free will, because in this expansion energy, especially since the we hit it, eclipse energy and so on and so forth, and we started getting to the fire of the year, which is towards the end of this year. Now a lot of people are coming to. I find they're coming to me and they're saying, "Just tell me what I need to do. Just tell me." And I'm saying, well, here are the potentials. Let's look at your potentials, because we can't negate your free will. You're a starseed. This is what you came down here to do. So, so I totally get that. And going back to the stock market crash of 29 and the other and the Saturn Uranus squares and so on and so forth. Are there any other potentially big astrological kind of blips in the radar coming that might say that we've got something coming in terms of crashes and things like that, or not just yet?
What you're just talking about, because otherwise, how long have you got? But if you're just talking financially, I would say, well, Uranus stays in Taurus. Uranus is the radical shocks. Taurus is money, banking, currencies, wealth. That stays in Taurus till 2026. But it is most potent while the nodal axis is also in Taurus and Scorpio, because that's the financial axis. So the nodal axis stays in Taurus and Scorpio until mid next year, sort of July next year, and then it changes. So I would say the strongest probability for any more financial volatility is between now and the middle of next year.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it makes a lot of sense. Shall we move on to the real meat of what I wanted to get to today, if that's all right by you?
Yeah, just one thing I'd like to add to what you were saying, Alexander, because it's very well observed. When you're talking about people coming to you and saying, tell me what's going to happen. That happens so much with astrology. What's fated for? What are the stars going to do to me? And in every piece of work I put out, what I hope I'm saying is they're not doing anything to you. They're strategic opportunities for you to grow. So turn that whole thing around. What are you going to do with that quality of energy in this moment of time? How are you going to play the music better? Get out of this victim mode, because if you're giving away your power to the planets, you're never going to elevate your own sense of empowerment. Step into your power. Okay, what's the weather forecast going to say? And how do I then play? Do I decide to go out with an umbrella? Do I change my clothing? Do I stay? You're watching the probabilities unfold, but then you as an individual decide on a course of action, having seen those probabilities on the weather forecast of the cosmic news.
And on top of that, Pam, it's actually in some respects harder than ever to predict where someone will be going energetically in a new energy we have never been in before.
Absolutely.
And so I don't try. In fact, what I actually do now is I teach people how to channel themselves. So I teach people how to channel the information themselves, what I do. So instead of, in the Piscean age, it was all about you went to a guru, the guru told you what to do, you went away, you did it, then you came back for a bit more. Aquarius is much more about empowerment, giving people the tools so they can go and do it. And starseeds, quite frankly, can come down here and do what they're meant to be getting on with, which is doing it themselves.
Absolutely, 100%. Really, really endorse that. Yeah, absolutely.
March. March, Saturn moving in to Pisces, the main stage, Pluto moving into Aquarius just for a minute, going back out, and then coming back in for something like 48 years, or is it how many?
No, Pluto moves fully into Aquarius in December 24 until 2044, so it'll be there fully for 20 years.
But we're going to get a little taster in March, right? Along with Saturn and Mars Also, I've written this down.
Stops being out of bounds in March.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And moving into Cancer, offering sort of more forward momentum and clarity.
Yeah, because for as long as it's in Gemini, it's very interesting, particularly when it's retrograde. Retrograde's about going back over. And so Gemini represents the information, the facts that we've been perhaps making decisions on. And retrograde Mars is really asking us to question or re-examine, do we still think those were good decisions on reliable information and facts? Because Mars is also square to Neptune Pisces, which brings a lot of fog and silt and, you know, other stuff in there. Would we still make those same decisions with the information we now have going forwards? You know, so this is a real pivot point of awareness and choice with Mars in Gemini. I think very important to re-examine what choices we made based on the information we thought we had, which we thought was truthful. But maybe it wasn't quite as truthful as we thought because of the square of Neptune in Pisces. Am I making sense?
Yes, you are. Yes, you
okay,
are. If you weren't, I would very politely say, "Don't worry, you're not." But
okay, okay, March.
So I mean, from on a galactic level, what I see is a lot of inverted codes falling away. A consciousness definitely going to another level. Soul guides, or your soul guides who you had, ETs you were working with, more are going to come in, or they're going to change. There's going to be a flip. Shadow work, shadow self is going to be different. Those who are on top of it are going to just rock it, basically, because they're not going to be triggered by all of that 3D stuff anymore. But those who've still got a lot of their shadow, I think it's going to be downright a bit tough, if I'm being honest, if you haven't worked through that by that point in March. So I think, you know, it's funny how we have all these astrological things and these energy things getting us to slow down, have a look, rethink, expand. It's like almost like teeing us up for March is almost like what I see. And the other thing I want to add to that, apart from obviously the obvious things like technology expanding, technology with Pluto and sociological things, is one thing I see is more people falling into and it becoming socially acceptable, the type of work me and you do, and people making more businesses out of it, and that being a massive energetic leap forward. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, that, you know, technology is most certainly coming in for sure, you know, lickety split. I mean, it's interesting. I have to go for some major surgery quite soon, so I had to, for the first time in many years, you know, go into doctor's surgery, hospital, etc. And it was just like a different world. And I thought, wow, I simply do not operate in this. I don't recognize this world. I don't operate in it, but because it's such a mechanical thing I have to have fixed, inevitably I have to go through this process. But it was quite a shock to me because I've removed myself, I've unplugged myself so fully from that 3D matrix and all the digitization, and you can't find a human being. You've got to go through the system and press, but, you know, blah. And so, you know, as we move towards Pluto moving into Aquarius, which is huge, the shadow side, the less positive side of that, is controlled by technology. And, you know, for instance, if people haven't seen it or aren't aware of it, I'd strongly recommend they go onto YouTube and look at the Chinese social credit system and how that operates and how your life is run by your mobile phone and your credit score. Strongly recommend that, because that's the less positive side of Pluto in Aquarius. But however, there's a very, very positive side of Pluto moving into Aquarius, which I can, you know, get into and talk about right now if you'd like me to, which is very different. I think the core question is, what does it mean to be human?
Okay, go for it. Go on. I'd love you to.
What does it mean to be human? You know, unless we stay rooted in our humanity, we are, in my view, lost at sea. You know, we really are, because we're giving away our power to gadgets, essentially. And being a dedicated country bumpkin, that's not the way I'm headed. That's not the way I'm going to go. So Pluto is the planet of power. And if we look back historically, I had to do a big live event recently where I was looking at exactly this theme and looking back over the centuries. You know, Pluto has a 246 to 248 year cycle, so it doesn't move into Aquarius very often. And so looking back at those cycles, as it's moving to the end of Capricorn, which it always has to do before it enters Aquarius, because Capricorn comes before Aquarius, and currently now it's moving through those last 3 degrees. It's quite a complex process because Pluto will always intensify the symbolism of the sign it's moving through. So Capricorn is about top-down structures, governments, organizations, institutions that have power over you, because it's a kind of vertical structure. So particularly over the last few years, has that been strengthened, would we say? Strengthened over the individual? I'd say it has. But Pluto also at the same time uncovers or reveals any corruption that is present in those systems. So it intensifies the top-down power, but at the same time reveals the corruption. So it's quite a complex process. It's going to keep on doing that until December 24. But the fact it starts to move into Aquarius is a very different energy. Because again, looking at, I mean, one of the best examples I can quote is Pluto was in Aquarius in 1789. In France, this was the time of the, you know, a golden, greedy monarchy of Louis XVI.
And of course, Henry VIII saying goodbye to the Pope in 15. That was also Pluto.
1593. So, you know, Henry VIII weakened the top-down power of the then. What was the top-down power then? It was the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
In 1789, it was the monarchy, particularly in Europe. So the peasants couldn't even afford to buy bread. So on the 14th of July, 1789, they stormed the Bastille and took down the French monarchy, since which time it's been a republic. So the shift of Pluto, the planet of power, out of Capricorn and into Aquarius will shift the power to the people. Grassroots up, horizontal social structure, no longer top down, done with that. Ordinary people getting together in community, collaboration, saying, we want to create a better world. That is happening all over the friggin' world right now. We're not waiting for it. It's now. It's already happening because Jupiter's moved through Aquarius, Saturn is still there. So they've become kind of John the Baptist, you know, precursors to Pluto moving into Aquarius. So we are going to see a significant shift of the power shifting back to the people. You know, and you know, all the groups that are happening all over the world, and you know, I talk about these endlessly. People's Health Alliance, People's Food and Farming Alliance, and Glastonbury, Crops Not Shops. You know, power is shifting back to the people, and that's what is to be celebrated, because it's real heart-to-heart community. And Aquarius as a sign doesn't really have any heart. It's higher mind, it's galactic, it's very intellectual. It can be hyper-rational, hyper-intellectual, but that's why we've got to anchor everything in our hearts, because that's where our humanity is.
Again, I could not, I totally agree. I totally agree. I mean, I actually did a reading on March. And what came up was people really having to move and make a conscious decision. There is this uprush of heart energy that I actually get. And people having to really make a conscious decision. I would put the picture of the cards on here, but I'll just talk about it for now. But and then actually people suddenly be getting a lot more psychic, and there's a little bit of stagnation. There's a rush of right, off we go, and it moves very, very quickly going in towards April.
Yeah,
is what I see.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's very interesting as well with Saturn moving into Pisces at the same time. Now, Saturn moved into Aquarius on the 22nd of March, 2020. And I mean 2020. Saturn is the planet of limitation, and Aquarius represents freedom. What happened across most of the world on the 23rd of March, 2020? We went to a global lockdown, limitation on freedom.
Yeah.
And so what I'm anticipating positively is when Saturn moves out of Aquarius into Pisces, there will be an opening up of freedoms, because Aquarius is the sign of freedom, it's the sign of rebellion, revolution, human rights, civil rights. So as Saturn, the constraint moves out of it, there'll be a kind of buoying up, you know, a buoyancy.
Absolutely. I mean, I was trying to get a take on that buoyancy, and I kept on getting the Knight of Swords, this very quick rush of energy and people doing it together. on a tarot level. So a bit of tarot and astrology sort of mixed in there. I love all this. You know what I love is when you mix lots of different esoterics together with a little bit of stardust galactic stuff on top, and you just get a cake that I just love.
Yeah, me too. Me too. I love it. You know, tarot, spirituality, you know, channeling, all these different modalities, when they feed in and validate what somebody else is saying, because as I say, I'm coming from a much more analytical point of view, you know, it's really thrilling that there are many, many aspects coming into this that feel very exciting. Now, Pluto will only stay in Aquarius from March till June. It then goes back into the end of Capricorn until the end of the year. So we might be again going back into a slight last gasp and grasp on power by, you know, the top-down structures, but you know, we'll have moved on to such an extent by then, because the New Earth communities are starting up. They'll say, do you know what, I'm just not buying that anymore, I'm afraid. So there's much more momentum from the grassroots up at that point. And that will continue through 24. I mean, there's a beautiful conjunction between Jupiter and Uranus in 2024 that will certainly bring in a lot more galactic connection, I think, if it doesn't happen before that.
Yeah. And what I think what's great also about March, and certainly towards the end of April, is on the readings that I've done, I think this winter could be a winter of discontent for some people. You know, it's going to be an interesting winter. There's no running away from that. But what I do see is that, as you know, as that Pluto starts to come in and touch for the first time, I do see a lot of happiness around. I do see a contentedness, forward momentum, psychic intuition coming back in, that lost feeling going. So it's almost like we've done all the expansion. It's gone from the subconscious to the conscious. We're grounding it down now. Now we're going to use it. It's foot on the pet. That's what I'm seeing.
Yeah, it's interesting. And most of the outer planets are in direct motion by January, whereas they've been in retrograde most of them, you know, for months. Saturn and Pluto are now moving direct. And that's why we're getting, you know, more of a kind of moving forwards feeling, but that moving forwards feeling will increase from January. And then by kind of April, May, June time, we've also got Jupiter coming to conjunct the North Node. Coming to conjunct the nodes, which starts to, you know, feel very positive, you know, very positive indeed at that time. So, and it will be hanging around close to that nodal axis, and that's about abundance, future vision, expansion, optimism, higher consciousness, all of those things. So yeah, I'm feeling much, you know, there's just this momentum which starts to really gather.
Yeah. And on the spiritual level, I mean, I definitely, and I'm seeing new things happening all the time. When I'm working with clients, suddenly, you know, angelic energy suddenly came in the other day that I never worked with. So things are expanding so quick. I have to keep relearning what I'm doing almost on a daily basis. I keep unlearning stuff. I mean, I have to constantly keep up with myself and make sure I'm checking myself. That's that's how quick it's moving. And the problem is that, you know, the body can't always keep up with the mind. So we've got to sometimes slow down to, you know, allow these calibrations for the body. Really, you know, important.
Yeah, 100%. And just, you know, just keep dropping into the breath, dropping into the heart, bare feet on the ground. You know, really keep it simple, because I think there's so much happening out there, both on the 3D level, but also energetically. It's easy to get swept away by just the overwhelm of stimulus. And so therefore, come back to the simple, come back to your heart, come back to what you know is your anchor, your center. Keep it really, really simple, because when we do that, we get to this one-pointedness. And it's the one-pointedness that I think gives us the mastery. I mean, this is so important in martial arts. It's important in meditation. It's that one-pointedness that gives us that sense of power, and power not in an aggressive or egotistical way, not at all. It's just a sense of boom, I know who I am, what my unique essence is, what I can offer to the world. And it's so simple. And that's what we've got to keep on coming back to, I think, when things just seem kind of crazy, either on the 3D level or the esoteric level, because it's happening so fast.
Yeah. Someone was, I have a friend who's an astrologer, and they said to me out the blue, so what do you think about past March astrologically? And I said, well, I'm not an astrologer. And they said, oh, have you heard about Uranus in Gemini in 2026? I'm like, no. Is that something? So I thought I'd ask you, is that something?
Yeah, it certainly is, because Uranus stays in a sign for about 7 years. So it starts to move into Gemini in 2025, fully in 2026. I mean, Gemini is the sign of communication, and Uranus represents the galactic. So are we going to start to much more openly communicate with the galactics from that point on? I think we absolutely are. It's interesting, if I look back historically at a previous time when Pluto was in Aquarius and no, correction, it wasn't in Aquarius, it was just Uranus in Gemini. And a new theory of light waves were developed by, I think he was a Dutch scientist called Huygens, Huygens, in 1691. And he developed this whole new idea about light, that it operated in waves. So I think things around light, around plasma physics, again, around the nature of our reality. Is this just inert air all around us, or is it divine intelligence that we're just floating in? You know, all of that stuff, I think, becomes very exciting indeed, because, of course, Pluto will still be very much in Aquarius at that point until 2044. So, yeah, when Uranus moves into Gemini, I think that is, and boy, things will be going so fast, so fast. You've got 2 air signs there, 2 of the heavy outer archetypes moving through air signs. I think, you know, it's unimaginable how quickly things are going to move. And I think we'll be living in a reality where we are much less dense, much more crystalline. We've stepped much more into the light body, which is happening for us already. That's starting to happen. And this tracks back to the Lemurians. Lemuria was probably one of the most perfect civilizations on Earth we ever had, but they lived in their light bodies. Essentially, they rarely came down into density. They were connected to their so-called physical body with a very long cord of consciousness, like a silver cord, and off they were, just having a great time in the galaxies. So we're moving, because those frequencies are coming back in now. That's the kind of civilization that we're starting to move towards, and it will come in faster than we might imagine. Life has been very slow for us in this lifetime up to this point.
Well, when I brought in a channel message from the Arcturians, and they talk about the new Lemuria. That's how they sometimes talk about it.
Wow. Okay.
So the galactics talk about it as well, you know, that the incredible feminine energy, very, very, very high celestial sort of feminine energy. And of course, it is folklore, but I certainly believe this myself. But some of the highest peaks that still exist in Hawaii are of that, I believe, are still those final peaks of Lemuria. I believe that.
Yeah, absolutely. And the mountaintops were very, very precious to the Lemurians. And they were so they were so connected to the earth because they were botanists, but they had this, deep, deep connection to the earth. Everything was oneness. It wasn't that they ever exploited or ravaged the earth in the way that we have. They were just part of nature. And the mountaintops were particularly powerful as energy vortices for the Lemurians.
Well, and I can tell you why on a scientific level, if you'd like.
Yeah, sure. Fascinating.
When you get we do a bit of science here, but you see, people, the ancient Egyptians were actually very technologically advanced, and people forget that. They had hydraulic presses that were very, very powerful, and they had hydro things that went arms and stuff. So when you look at some of the sarcophaguses, whatever.
Yeah, I guess, or sarcophagi, or
sarcophagi. Sometimes some of the archaeologists they find like a slimy liquid on the actual sarcophagi, and it's because it's the hydraulic press, the oils they were using to actually not only put all the weights up and down, but lift those big blocks up for the pyramids and everything else. So if we go into science, if we go to Lemuria. And you were talking about the mountaintops, so important. Well, I'm going to tell you why. Because it's scientific. Because what happens if you take certain ceramics of a certain nature, of a certain material, and you freeze them to sub-zero temperatures, they take on quantum attributes that are magnetic, and things float on top of them. So the Lemurians, what they did was they went up to the very, very cold temperatures in the mountains, and they were using that very, very cold temperature to magnify and accelerate quantum attributes, not only with their consciousness, but with also in certain materials, in order to advance their technology, which they used consciousness to adapt, much like an ET would use their consciousness to fly a ship. So although, you know, Lemurians didn't have like an iPod like we might have with a certain type of technology, they had a technology that was as advanced back then. So it's funny you should mention the mountain peaks, because that is exactly correct. But it's not woo-woo magic, it's just science. And what is metaphysics? It's just one step beyond the science we have now, isn't it?
That's so interesting, because also another theme of Uranus being in Taurus, the Earth, is about changes in magnetism, the magnetic field, which, you know, we've just talked about, we've got at the moment. But in the Russian space program, and I've mentioned this in another video recently, what they found was when they sent astronauts beyond the magnetic field of the Earth, they started to become super psychic, have visions, etc. So they discovered that magnetism was inversely correlated to consciousness, i.e. the lower the magnetism, the higher the consciousness goes, potentially. We don't have to leave the Earth currently to raise our consciousness because the magnetic field has dropped. But this whole area around magnetism and plasma, I mean, this is to be discovered. This is magical, how we can use this.
Yeah. Well, I mean, people go on about the veil dropping, but what is the veil? I mean, the veil scientifically is gravity and the magnetics and the electromagnetics changing in the ionosphere dropping, and that is what people know as the veil, because we have been veiled, which is also and that is actually governed by some of the angelic realms, Metatron, Cryon, you know, some of the celestials. So as the veil drops, it is actual science. All of this is science. It's a bit like angstroms. You know, have you seen a fan disappear when you put it on?
Oh, yes.
It gets very, very quick because light is speeding up around the particles as they're moving so quick. It becomes see-through because it's speeding up in our dimensionality. Well, this is how ET ships work. They use particles. They speed up the particles so they become invisible. It's like a fan. So you're looking at something solid, and I think it's angstrom particles or how you measure it, and that's how it speeds up. So it's all science. That's all it is. Just some of it's science we know about, some we don't.
Yeah, that's absolutely fascinating. The other thing about magnetism as well is there's some very kind of dry areas in the world, but if I'm thinking of particular of an area in southwest France at the moment where they get very, very little rain, but the earth there is incredibly magnetic. So the fruit, the vegetables, I mean, like footballs, incredibly abundant because of the magnetism of the earth, brings a lot of fertility to the soil, even if there's minimal rain. So I think because of Uranus in Taurus, we're going to be discovering an awful lot about how we use magnetism, how we use light, how we use, because plants and vegetables will have different optimum growths to different colors of light. That's on the, you know, the electromagnetic scale. So there's a whole, you know, there's a whole thing there that we've got L plates on at the moment in our understanding that we can grow food much more efficiently.
Absolutely, and that's how you get lost time, because there are parts, because there's the Gaia grid and there's the crystalline grid, but in the Gaia grid there are parts of the magnetics of Earth that are completely different, and you get a pocket, and if you walk through it you get missing time, because time travel is electromagnetic and gravity. You know, the Philadelphia experiment, so blah 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 blah. You go, this is my Arcturian self coming through, the scientific part of me. So but yeah, we could go on and on and on and on about it. Perhaps is there I'm so grateful that you could be with me today. I'm so grateful that you said yes. Is there anything you'd like to kind of round up, finish on to advice for people to think about, something you want to give, something to think about maybe?
Yeah, I just come back to that really basic principle of keep it simple. Drop into your breath, drop into your heart, close your eyes, switch off external stimuli, particularly the news, and just be with yourself and start to discover, maybe for the first time, what it's like just to sit in stillness and start to find that still point. Because the more you can land at that still point, the more power you have in controlling and determining your reality. And it really is that, I mean, it sounds incredibly difficult and complicated. It isn't, it's absolutely elementary, but it's practice that gets us to recognize that still point. So that's the overriding thing. I'm not doing any client work. I'm spending 7 days a week really trying to, with interviews like this and my YouTube updates and social blogs, long newsletter, really help people go through this big transformation as best I'm able. We've all got a different piece of the puzzle with this. So
yeah, we have that is absolute sage advice. Yeah, go, stay silent, go inside, because with stressed nervous system, your crown chakra is going to shut down, your third eye is going to shut down, you're going to have root issues and so on and so forth. And sage advice. And just for me to finish, I love how the galactic stuff, the astrological stuff, all these little dovetails. And when you do have that big overview perspective, and you can see it, it's just incredible how it all fits together. And you think, the creator, the person that put this universe together, I mean, it's just the magic behind it
it's immense. And, even when times are rough at the 3D level, and they are going to be rocky, as, the old world is breaking down. The world we've known, the systems we've known, the foundations we've had, that is breaking down. So, but if you say, okay, well, the astrology says that's going to happen,
yeah.
Even though you're going, you're demolishing your old kitchen and it's a mess and it's uncomfortable, but you have to go through that process. It's meant to happen. And the astrology in that sense is massively reassuring, because it says, yep, it's meant to be uncomfortable. It's meant to collapse at the 3D level in order to get us to a better place. But remember, you don't have to live at the 3D level. You can step back and observe. That's so important.
Absolutely. And one thing I like about the Arcturians and the Pleiadians, so people won't know that the Arcturians actually seeded the Pleiadians, but that's a galactic bedtime story for another time, is that they have always said, and this is where I get my information from, that the big reconstructing years would be 2020 to 2025, and then you get the base all built on from there. And then you start seeing some of the big changes really coming into real fruition on a physical level, maybe around 2027 or something there onwards. And then, there we go. So
fantastic. Well, let's hope we can speed that up, particularly if time doesn't exist. Let's hope we can speed that up.
Yeah. Well, I'll have a chat to some of my galactic mates and see what I can do.
See what they can do. But it's in for another upgrade.
Yeah. Okay, Pam. Well, look, thank you so much for your time. It's a delight to chat to you, and you're a total intellect. I mean, I love just buzzing off what you're saying, and vice versa, and dovetailing all our stuff. So you're such a joy to speak to you, and have a wonderful, very cold, wet, rainy evening. And I'll see you soon. And thank you again for
thanks so much, Alexander. Really enjoyed that. It was great fun. Thank you so much. Have a lovely evening yourself.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.